Hi, my name is Roger Blair. I'm a co-founder and past national president of the Oregon-California Trails Association, which we affectionately call OCTA, O-C-T-A. OCTA's mission is to preserve the stories of the intrepid pioneers that traveled this way in the 1800s on their way to settle Oregon, as well as preserve the physical remnants of what remains of the trail and protect those. I'm standing at the edge of a wheat field because this is one location where you can still see evidence of the numerous wagons that traveled west, despite the cultivation of fields. In general, they get lost, but in here you can still see evidence. At the edge of this field, it's been cultivated, and in the spring when the wheat starts growing, you can actually still see evidence of where the trail ran. There's a different color of vegetation. We used to be able to see the trail coming through fields, leading across this road and continuing on west. But this is a good example of why OCTA was formed and why I would invite you to get interested in the trail and learn more about it and more about the experiences, but also about why we need to preserve what does remain. Last year, this field remained fallow, and this year, as you can see, it's been converted to a potato field. And the potato field culture requires more cultivation of the soil, and that will destroy any evidence of where the trail route actually ran through this field. This is a T-rail marker made out of railroad rail that one of the projects that OCTA does to inform the public and put the knowledge out there that this is the trail and this is why it should be preserved. There's always an inscription or a quotation from a diary or journal. This particular one is from Michael Luark, and on August 17, 1853, going over the highland and had very good road except the dust, reaching the river in 17 miles after going down a long hill. Spring is to the right side of road at the foot. This is an area called Corral Spring. It was a spring located near the Umatilla River, down in the river valley, that is open to the public, provided there's respect for the landowners. And the Park Service, the National Park Service, has placed an interpretive sign at the entrance where you can hike up to see this T-rail and walk a short segment of ruts. You can see the ruts as a twin row of a trail leading down that long hill that Luark describes. Our last stop is 2.5 miles west of Echo, in an area that I call OCTA's sacred ground. I consider this the birthplace of OCTA. In the spring of 1982, Bob and Bertha Reynolds, who were LeGrand, Oregon residents, they had been giving 2 projector slideshows of the Oregon Trail. Bob was a retired Department of Transportation employee who had been involved in studying the Oregon Trail for the state, but was retired, and he and Bertha spent time going to different organizations, telling them about the trail and presenting their pictures. In 1982, in the spring, they came to this site and found that some deep swales had been converted to a potato field. That prompted them to wonder, well, what can we do to save what's left of the Oregon Trail? The only thing they knew to do was to write Gregory Francois, whom they knew through his book, The Oregon Trail Revisited. Greg owned a publishing firm that was a public relations specialist in St. Louis, and had written The Oregon Trail Revisited, which was a turn-by-turn guide to the trail from the trailhead to Oregon. So they wrote Greg actually in what could be done. Fortunately, this timing coincided with the fact that the Park Service was completing the Comprehensive Management and Use Plan for the Oregon National Historic Trail. In 1978, Congress had passed legislation adding a category to the National Trail System of National Historic Trails, and the Oregon Trail was one of the first that was designated. In that plan, which was headed up by Dr. John Latcher in the National Park Service's Denver Service Center, Latcher had called for the establishment of a National Trails Association for advocacy and endowment of activities associated with the trail. Franzwa had been the only one really of any significance that had been promoting the trail, and he was beginning to see losses such as the Reynolds were telling him about. So in response to the Reynolds letter, Greg decided to contact Latcher and see about forming an advocacy organization. Greg proposed to call it the Western Trails Association. He then proceeded to call a group of trail scholars and interested people to a meeting in August 12, 1982 in Denver Service Center of the Park Service with Latcher hosting. There were several members that came there, and they began to make the framework for what became OCTA. By the time they finished that afternoon, the OCTA had been formed. It included everything from the fact we wanted the scholarly journal, the Overland Journal, to a members newsletter, the News from the Plains, to activities and outings, including we set a convention for 1983 in August in Independence. Franzwa had frequently been asked what prompted him to form the organization, and how did OCTA come about. And I have a quote here that I'd like to read that he specifically said. He said, "The one I recall most vividly was destruction of the fine rut swales on property near Echo, Oregon. Now you can complain all you want to, but there is no way to bring back ruts that have been plowed up for a potato field. About all one can do is pray the potatoes won't grow. And I did. And they didn't. But I was told that the farmer was unaware that those were the ruts of the Oregon Trail. Obviously an education campaign was needed." That set the motion in the back of Greg's mind about an organization to advocate for preserving and promoting the Oregon Trail. Obviously, Greg wasn't specific enough in his prayers because the potatoes didn't grow, but this deep swale here ends in a wheat field, and the wheat does very well here. So this was how OCTA was formed. This was the conditions that brought it about. Why I look upon Echo Meadows as sacred ground for OCTA. I encourage you to join OCTA, to study, get to know it, learn these sites, and become knowledgeable about why we need to preserve our heritage. Thank you for coming along. This has only been a short 10-mile stretch of Oregon Trail ruts and sites, and I hope that you see why we are passionate about the Oregon Trail.